Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Colonna, and this is Nashville. We are starting off our Citywide reporter roundup with Jeremy Finley, chief investigative reporter for News Channel 4. He is that's the NBC affiliate here in Nashville. He specializes in investigations into political corruption, criminal activity, and a waste of taxpayers' money. Now, Jeremy's work has resulted in multiple criminal charges, prison sentences, TBI, and district attorney investigations, new state laws, as well as the resignation of one of the highest paid elected officials in Nashville, a $1 million payout to the victims of a nationwide company scamming the sick and uninsured, and also the discovery of missing girls. He's won 21 Emmys, get that, 21, 4 Edward R. Murrow Awards, and is the 3-time recipient of the IRE Award, one of the highest honors in investigative journalism. In 2016, the Tennessee Associated Press named him Journalist of the Year. Outside of his work at Channel 4, he's also the co-host of the public affairs program A Word on Words, which profiles authors and their novels on Nashville Public Television, and he is a novelist himself. Jeremy, you are a very, very busy man. We're glad to have you here. Welcome to This Is Nashville.
Well, I'm a huge fan of the show, and it's a little surreal to see you and hear you almost every day, so it's great to be here.
It's great to have you here. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to get into 2 of your recent stories in a bit, but before we do, just tell us, what is an investigative reporter?
So I always say that investigative reporting is uncovering what people don't want to be uncovered. So, and you have to be in the business of being comfortable making people uncomfortable. And when you think about the great investigations that have really made changes across the country, it is always about uncovering really sometimes salacious, but really challenging stories. These are not easy stories to uncover. These are not things that people a lot of times in power want to be uncovered. So that's, I think, the difference between the reporters that are on the ground every day covering the events of the city and letting people know what's happening day to day, and those of us that work in the investigative field. It's essentially they're covering the events and we are uncovering the stories that, again, a lot of times people in power don't want people to know.
So along with having a natural curiosity, one has to have the mettle for it.
You do. You have to, again, like I said, be comfortable with making people uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to know that when you walk into a room, especially when you work in television, and people may have seen your face, that you get that certain look.
Yeah.
They're like, oh no, it's that guy. Mm-hmm. And you have to be comfortable with that. You do. I was always kind of a scrappy kid. I was always kind of a kid that was comfortable asking a lot of questions, not really satisfied when adults would tell me, it's not your business, Mm-hmm. You don't have to ask all those questions. So I'm comfortable in that. I'm comfortable in that arena, and I feel the job is important. I think it's a vital job to have in a city, especially one like Nashville that is growing so rapidly, and it needs a watchdog, and that's why investigative reporters are essential.
Let's talk about how you make people uncomfortable with one of your more recent stories. It's the new Nashville mental health response teams. We have a clip of the story. Let's take a listen now.
6 days after the city announced the city's latest team of police officers partnered with mental health clinicians, that program is already facing criticism.
A Nashville family says when their son needed help the most, none of the specialized teams ever responded.
Well, as part of his In Crisis series, chief investigative reporter Jeremy Finley started digging on this. So, Jeremy, you found a troubling reality for people who need these services.
Yeah, that's right. And there is no question that this program is badly needed in the city's mental health crisis. It puts police officers with trained clinicians in squad cars responding to emergency calls. But data shows the program simply can't keep up with the demand.
Ma'am, I've got the police on the line. Go ahead.
I'm not a psychiatrist. I can't. Somebody has got to get this boy some help.
Kim Lively is at the desperation point.
something is wrong with him.
It's October 23rd, 2022. For the fourth time in 2 months, her call to Davidson County's crisis line is transferred to 911. Her mentally ill son, Triandis Farmer Jr., is acting dangerously paranoid.
We need to get help before he hurt somebody or he hurt himself.
In the calls, she asks for mental health clinicians, the same people featured in the Partners in Care program, citizen mental health experts placed in squad cars with Metro Police.
Are you guys coming with the mobile crisis, or are you just coming?
Yeah, I can have somebody come by and check on him.
The crisis people told us that every time we call, oh, we're coming out. They never came with the police, not one time.
Listen, with farmers spiraling, even the workers at the crisis line ask dispatchers specifically for CIT officers, meaning officers trained in mental health, or the Partners in Care teams.
I'm with the Davidson County Mobile Crisis Team. What we would ideally like to see happen is for our CIT, our North CIT folks, be involved in this.
911 records show dispatchers looked for the specially trained officers or the teams, but none were available. Only police officers without the training responded to farmers' crisis.
We were just trying, so hard. And me personally, I knew something was gonna happen. And I knew that if they didn't help him, that he was gonna die, and he did.
Instead of being evaluated by a mental health expert, Farmer was arrested and taken to jail. He was eventually released. Not long after, he walked into traffic and died.
He's young. He didn't even get to have a life.
Following Farmer's death, WSMV4 Investigates requested responses from the Partners in Care program. 911 records show Partners in Care were requested in 7,439 calls. They responded only 3,422 times, less than half.
I felt like if the crisis people could have come, talked to him, it would have been better.
There's a great mental health crisis in our country.
Michael Randolph helped develop the Partners in Care program. I'm wondering what the message is for the people of the city. When they call and they can't get a Partners in Care team, what are they supposed to do?
We're going to look at the data when the calls are coming in, look at what calls we're missing, where do we need to expand next? It's always a data-forward approach.
Make sure that he's breathing.
At the city's 911 center, calls for the specialized teams and officers simply outnumber how many trained mental health responders are available.
We recognize there's a problem. What I would, instead of saying, man, half don't get it, what I would celebrate is the 50% that do, that 2 years ago would have only received an officer with no mental health clinician.
But the Farmer family isn't celebrating. They're mourning the loss of their son.
Mental health does not mean a crime. That means you need help.
You know, so Jeremy, in this story about mental health crisis response team, she spoke to Kim Lively. She's the mother who called Davidson County Crisis Line to get help for her son, Triandis Farmer Jr. Tell me, what do you hope people take away from her experience and what this mother had to share?
Well, I think that the experience is so universal that we all have someone in our lives that is suffering from mental illness. And when Kim reached out to me, this took us a year to put this piece together because we had to understand how this happened. And when Kim reached out to me, she said, all I know is that they didn't come. It was just police officers, but I don't have the answers. I don't know how this happened. And it literally took us that long to piece together how this program worked, why there would be this type of delay, and then to finally get the numbers. And so I think that's a lot of times people will, criticize journalism. And, it's fine. If you work in journalism, you have to be used to the criticism. But we care deeply about these stories, and we care deeply about the people we do stories about. And so I think what I want people to know is that what our job is often to challenge even positive things. This is a great program. It's so needed in the city. But when we have a family that has experienced this, and then we pull the numbers that show what the reality is, that's what we do. And, it's why people reach out to us even when it makes people uncomfortable.
Now, did Kim reach out to you? That's how the story got on your radar?
She did. She reached out. I would say a good 90% of my stories come from just viewers or listeners or readers that will have seen our work or are familiar with our work and reach out to us in our various tip lines and say, look, I need help. I need some help understanding how this happened.
Now, your investigation found that since this CIT program, the Crisis Intervention Team. This program was put into place at the end of 2021 through this past February. Here in 2024, CIT responded less than half of the time that they were requested. They're responding, but not meeting the demand for our services. You just said this is a positive thing for our city, but it's not doing enough. What do you make about the city or the county not having enough resources?
I think it is a situation that's happening to cities all across the country. You know, everyone is waking up to the mental health crisis. Everyone is realizing, okay, this is something that is either not going away or we've been ignoring for far too long. And kudos to the Mental Health Cooperative for creating this program with Metro Police. But the reality is they just don't have enough people. They don't have enough funding. They don't have enough people that and what we're really seeing here is that there's so much a demand for it. So many people are calling and saying, my loved one is in a psychotic state, or I'm worried about this person. There's just not enough of them. And so all we can do in situations like this is expose the problem, let the city leaders know about it, and it really goes into their hands. You know, if they feel like they need to put more money towards it, great, fantastic. The more people, the better. So it's, you know, it's what we do. We expose it, and we have to let the elected officials take it from there.
Now, you spoke to Stephen Martini. He's the director of Metro Emergency Communications. He acknowledged the lack of responses for CIT, but, you know, he also spun it positively, let's say. He said that, you know, 50% of the time people's needs are being met. How do you interpret that response?
So I always have to appreciate the position that they're taking. These are the people that are on the front lines, right? They're the ones saying, look, we're doing the work. We're putting in the effort. Yes, there's a problem here, but look how it is also working. And so I appreciate that. You know, as a journalist, what's what we do? We scrutinize, and we have to question, and we have to ask the questions they may not like to hear. But it's okay to be able to hear a different voice in a piece like that saying, look, the way we see it is this way. Somebody may disagree, but I think it's important to let them have their say.
What do you want listeners to take away from this story?
I think that you have to be cognizant about what's happening in your own city. And I think that's the importance of your show and the importance of other journalism in this city is you have to pay attention. I'll hear people say, oh, I don't watch the news, or I don't read the newspaper, I don't listen to that. And I think, look, this is an example of you need to know this is going on. Because if it happens to you, and there's a good chance it could, you could have a loved one or come across somebody, and somebody doesn't send a specially trained person out to you, you're going to be asking, how is this happening? Well, if you inform yourself and you know what's going on in the city and you know what this is happening, then at least you can then be not only aware for yourself, but you can be more educated about what the real issues are facing the city.
Now, another recent story you worked on is about how sober drivers are being charged with DUIs. And that's really interesting to me. You know, the state utilizes both breathalyzers and blood alcohol tests to determine if someone's over the legal limit. Several police departments cite that blood tests are more accurate than field tests, and that officers in the field have to decide which test to use. However, okay, if an officer requests a blood alcohol test, it can take months for TBI to return the test because of the backlog of tests. Folks are forced to wait for a long time for results, end up kind of changing their lives drastically. I want to listen to a quick clip of a story that you had that happens to sober drivers who were arrested for DUI while waiting their test results.
I kept telling sir, you're making a mistake. I have not been drinking. I'm not impaired.
So you may be thinking it's a rare case, except it also happened to Bill Shank in Clarksville. His DUI arrest was plastered all over a local media outlet.
It feels surreal. It's like a joke.
And to Katie Slayton in Franklin. She was arrested in front of her child's daycare. Sober Middle Tennesseans arrested for DUI. And as a result, they say their lives are ruined. Not just because of the public stigma, but because a WSMV4 investigation found they have to wait months for blood tests to come back from the state of Tennessee, showing they were sober. As Rose waited for his blood test results, he lost his job, his insurance, and racked up hefty legal fees.
We lost close to $30,000 between legal fees and impound fees.
Slayton, who was charged with DUI and felony child neglect, had her child removed by DCS for 9 weeks.
They have traumatized my son. They have traumatized me.
Shank says while months passed by, so did jobs.
I lost 2 job opportunities because when you do my name and my city, my mugshot comes right up. It's not a flattering portrayal.
Right. This is one of those stories where people can think, wow, I hope that doesn't happen to me, or that's not going to happen to me. But the folks you spoke to in this story thought exactly the same thing.
Absolutely. And I think what is really astonishing to me is I honestly thought we would do this story. We had found a few cases and we would expose what's happening and kind of move on. I keep hearing from these drivers. After I leave this program today, I am going to go interview another driver. They keep showing up saying, this happened to me, this happened to me. So obviously there is a systematic problem here where we are finding all of these sober people arrested for DUI. And it's one of those stories that I just, when you hear the stories, it's astonishing because it literally could happen to any one of us.
Is it a case of officers making sure that, in essence, they do their due diligence in bringing someone if they have a question? If I'm a police officer and I pull over a driver and I put them through, I ask them, field sobriety test, and they agree, and I'm skeptical, shouldn't I err on the side of, hey, I'm bringing this person in just in case they're not inebriated?
Absolutely. This is almost a no-win situation for everybody involved. If you're a police officer, it is your job, and a very important job, to identify drunk drivers. So imagine you're out there, you see someone, they aren't performing well, they've drifted into one lane, something like that to get your attention, and you think, look, it's my job, I got to do it. But the reality is that there are other factors at play here. People's inability to really keep their balance well. In one case, we had a gentleman, they said, well, we smell alcohol on you. Well, that's because he had just put hand sanitizer on his hands. And so it's bad enough to being arrested. But the problem is that we have this backlog at the TBI, that it is months and months and months for people to waiting to prove themselves. And in the meantime, their lives are falling apart. So it is a systematic problem that we're trying to look for some solutions here in the people we're interviewing.
Now, about the backlog, you spoke with Jennifer Hall, who's the regional administrator for the TBI crime log. And she says, quote, that's not acceptable. And also, quote, there are times when our turnaround times was not acceptable. We understand, WPLN reporters have, we've talked about it in years past on this show, that there is a dearth of employees there for people to actually go through these tests. Has TBI, to your knowledge, done anything to increase staff?
Yes. So from our understanding is that they this year have hired more scientists in order to attack the backlog, specifically for the alcohol and blood tests. So by the end of the year, they hope to have at least, if I remember exactly, between, I think, 4 and 10 new scientists on hoping to address this issue, hoping to cut down on the backlog. But the reality is, if it happens now, you're still looking at months trying to get your report back.
Man. Okay, last question for you. You hold people accountable in your work. It's part of the job definition, let's say. You have these difficult conversations, and sometimes you're confronted by individuals and representatives of institutions that you're investigating. What does it take to have those conversations? How do you gear yourself up?
I think that I always just remind myself that they're a human being and I'm a human being, and I want to treat them as I would want to be treated. And there are times when people are very angry. There are times when people are very unhappy to see us or hear from us. But I always want to convey to them, look, you have a side of this story. People may not like it. I may not like it. The victim in this case might not like it. But your side of the story is important to hear so we can get the whole well-rounded issue. I think people sometimes think we enjoy having to walk up and ask people, and if they've not responded to our questions or our inquiry for an interview, that it's like we get a thrill from it. Nobody enjoys it. It's literally the last thing we want to have to do is to show up and confront someone with an unscheduled interview. But sometimes we have to go to that length to say, look, we're this serious about wanting to get your side of this and also to hold you accountable. So it is not the most pleasant part of the job, but it is something that we do if we have no other choice to get that other side of the story.
Well, the people of Nashville and Middle Tennessee appreciate the fact that you're doing the job.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
Jeremy Finley is the chief investigative reporter for News Channel 4. Again, thanks for being with us, sir.
Thank you for having me.
We're taking a short break. When we come back, Adam Sichko from the Nashville Business Journal will be joining us with a story about how the growth of Nashville is being stopped in Sumner County. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Music City Prep Clinic, Nashville-based provider for PrEP and offering comprehensive sexual health services in an environment designed to be safe, professional, and shame-free. Learn more at musiccityprep.org.
I'm Khalil Colonna, and this is Nashville. Welcome back to our Citywide Reporter Roundup. Today we're talking with journalists based here in Nashville who cover Middle Tennessee. Now, joining us to continue the conversation, is Adam Sichko. He's senior reporter for the Nashville Business Journal. Adam covers economic development, metro and state government, and transportation. He joined the Nashville Business Journal in 2014, first covering commercial real estate. He's won 4 National Reporting Awards from the Society for Advancing Business Editing and Writing. Adam, welcome to This is Nashville.
Hey, Cleo, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Okay, I want to jump to a story that you recently wrote about growth in Sumner County. Now, members of the conservative group called Sumner County Constitutional Republicans, listeners may know that we've done episodes about them in the past. They hold seats on the Sumner County Commission, and they're working to significantly contain growth in the county, which some feel is almost like a runaway train. Meanwhile, the Forward Sumner Economic Partnership, which is kind of like the county's Chamber of Commerce, is advocating for growth. Tug of war, so to speak. Tell us, what's really going on with growth in Sumner County right now? Who's for it? Who's against it? What are the implications?
It was a fascinating story for me to dig into because it was a reminder that we talk about Nashville is growing, and what the places where it's really growing rapidly is not in Davidson County. That our population has more or less held level. It's these surrounding counties to Nashville that are on the receiving end of all of this growth. Their percent gains in population have been much, much faster, some of the fastest in the state over recent years. And so the difference we saw in Sumner County is that we all talk about growing pains. We see the growth. You have arguments about what parts of it are good, what parts of it are bad. And so we all express those sentiments. The difference in Sumner County is that group has the majority control on the commission. They have the votes to do things to try to curb it, or certainly in the eyes of the business community up there, try to stop it entirely.
Now, in your article, you describe how many in Nashville, 60% of residents believe growth is making things worse. The difference, as you wrote, is, quote, in Sumner County is that those who oppose growth are in power, as you just kind of mentioned. Jerry Mansfield, a Sumner County commissioner, said, quote, people say you can't stop growth, and that's not true. You can stop it, reverse it, speed it up, slow it down. It all comes down to political will, end quote. So can those in power in Sumner County actually stop or slow the county's growth?
And he uses visceral language when he talks about growth. He talks about feeling like the county is being curb stomped by growth.
Wow!
And so it's a very strong backlash happening right now among that majority on the commission. And another fascinating element of the story is that they are really testing a couple of those old saws that you tend to hear in economic development, that all growth is good growth, or that you're either growing or you're dying. There's no stasis. There's no just status quo. And they're really on, again, in the eyes of the business community, they're on the attack, charging at those principles and really putting them to the test.
If you're just tuning in, this is Nashville, and I'm your host, Khalil Colonna. We're talking with journalists of the city this hour. My guest is Adam Sichko, senior reporter for the Nashville Business Journal. All right, so the pro-business perspective, the pro-growth perspective. Forward Sumner, that's the organization that's advocated for growth. They're kind of like the Chamber of Commerce, as I mentioned. Jimmy Johnston ran Forward Sumner for 18 years. He worked to develop infrastructure and the local workforce. He ran into opposition with the commission on several fronts. The relationship wasn't easy, as you report. Johnston said, quote, Not all growth is good growth. You can have the discussion, but it's harder when you're being demonized, end quote. Okay, so why do you think things kind of get contentious and a little bit ugly between Johnston and the county commission?
My takeaway from that comment was, wow, how things have changed. Because I think as a city of Nashville and as a region, for many years leading up to the present, there were concerted efforts to make growth happen, to go attract those businesses, to relocate here, incentivize them to expand here, draw more population to the area, draw big events to the area that help put Nashville and the region in a more visible national spotlight. And the growth has become so intense and that it's really flipped the dynamic of how economic development officials are viewed in their local communities. This is a conversation that is not happening just in Sumner County. It's happening in Nashville. It's happening in Williamson County right now. And it's just such a fascinating barometer into kind of the mood and the feeling of where we are right now, and the sense that there are so many outside forces that are shaping how the region is growing, because these people keep moving in here. Companies continue to want to come here for all of the reasons that are typically touted and highlighted. And those reasons remain true, but they're viewed through a totally different lens, again, by this group on the Sumner County Commission that sees farmland disappearing, feels like they don't have control as a county over being able to absorb the growth when it comes to roads, schools, and other infrastructure that you need for a functioning community.
Is the sentiment that's being from the backlash of growth, is that kind of from a be careful what you ask for situation? Nashville asked for growth. It's had it. It's happened rapidly. It's spreading out to other counties and surrounding areas while there's been economic profit and benefit for a certain amount of people. Not all. We talk about this on this show, and I'm sure you cover it in your reporting as well. It has put Nashville on a national, and some would say even global spotlight. We're looking at the dearth of resources, how we've kind of grown quickly. Did we kind of bite off more than we can chew?
The counterweight to that would be what you would hear from a Jimmy Johnston, which is you would rather have that set of issues to wrestle with than the set of issues that a community that is deteriorating has to deal with. I moved here from a sister outlet of ours in Albany, New York, and love my time there. But that upstate New York area, tail end of the Rust Belt, a lot of those communities in upstate New York are facing the issues of no jobs for their children to come back to when they go off to college, and declining population, or they celebrate because they hung on to the population they have. And so there's a shrinking tax base, paying for a lot of aging infrastructure. And, again, that counterweight is, there's probably a set of problems you're going to have to deal with, and it's which of these sets of problems would you want to deal with? But yeah, I think there's absolutely that sense of biting off more than we can chew has fueled a lot of how a lot of local political races have turned out in the last couple of years. And you hear it on the tip of the tongue in that Imagine Nashville survey response when you have such a sizable percentage saying that it's causing more harm than good, and that we've got to figure out a way right now to start to get our arms around it. That's been a rallying cry for years, but it's much more prominent today.
Okay, so what ultimately happened in that power struggle between Johnston and the Sumner County Commission?
They ultimately revoked the economic development funding that the county typically gives to that group, which was $100,000 a year, about a quarter of their annual budget. And again, that is a step we've seen here in Davidson County. The Nashville Chamber of Commerce for many years had a contract with the city, and that whittled away to eventually not exist in the present day. That's also a question popping up now in Williamson County about funding economic development efforts. So there were some back and forth negotiations where they wanted a lot of seats on his board, and they ultimately could not come to an agreement on the funding. So it doesn't exist today. And he's had a long career in economic development and retired last year. And so that's been a bit of a closing of the book there. And they're definitely in a new era there.
Okay, so with that, in that new era, what do you think will happen in Sumner County in terms of business development, economic development?
The majority on this commission has definitely alarmed a lot of the business leaders there, and they have started a political action committee. They've started efforts to recruit candidates, And so they've got some county commission elections coming up in less than 2 years or so, and that'll be a real barometer of where the broader mood in the county is, I think, when you see how those election results play out, because they're definitely putting the money into standing up some candidates and trying to give some, push things back more the direction they were more accustomed to.
All right, we're going to switch it up a little bit. You recently wrote a profile on Clay Travis. He's a Goodlettsville native, Vanderbilt-educated lawyer, former sports blogger, drive time radio host, and he's now the commenter on pretty much everything. Focuses on politics, sports, culture, pop culture. He runs the media business called Outkick from the bonus room in his Franklin home. He also hosts a podcast, and he's a regular guest on radio stations across the country and a frequent guest on Fox News. When did you first hear about Clay Travis?
He was really on the mind of our editor. And one of the things he says often is that any national level story that we're interested in writing, that there's a local example of that happening. And so we've certainly seen more attention in recent years paid to other conservative media that have moved into our backyard. The Daily Wire is headquartered here now, as an example. Clay's more of an OG in that sense. Okay. He's more of a kind of a Dave Ramsey example, where we've had these media figures in our area earlier than that, and you think about all the national level issues that have now infiltrated a lot of things that happen in just day-to-day life on the ground, sports and media and pop culture and school board races and libraries, and all those national political level things have really seeped down into so many other parts of our regular life that, and he's on the air, as you said, all the time, giving voice to a whole lot of opinions on it.
What would you track his rise to fame and popularity? What would you credit that to?
He's smart. He thinks big. He has reinvented himself several times along the way in his career, and what he very clearly knows audience. He has a sense of the pulse of his audience, and even, I would say, to some extent, the national mood, or the mood for a lot of people in the country. And he also, in the way that he's built that business, really taken cues from that audience and talks about that he believes he's giving them what they really want as opposed to what they say they want. One interesting window in our conversation was talking about the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And, he both believes that he's right on the arguments of when schools should have reopened and that sports should have continued to have been played. But he'll also, in the next breath, remind you that he was on a 3-hour national sports radio show for Fox at that time, and there were no sports. There was no product. And so into that void, he became an even louder and more prominent voice on issues that were even more socially charged, even more politically charged. He'd been trending that way in the few years leading up to that, but that point was a clear jump forward for where he was going.
It's definitely helped out his media brand, Outkick. Tell me about Outkick. What is it?
To me, it's a swirl of everything. It's anchored in sports, and sports betting, in fact, is a big part of that business model. And sports betting has proliferated around the country, that has certainly served to help his endeavor there. But you'll see a lot of politics on there. You'll see pop culture, media, music, entertainment. And so, again, it's kind of a mix of everything, but it seems to me that also reflects a lot of conversations and topics nowadays are not a one distinct thing. There's just a lot of ingredients working there.
And he's working his audience by giving them that. In his article, in your article, he talks about how he could stick to sports, but his 3 children are making him think about the world they're growing up in. And as he put it, quote, "I've got 3 kids and I care about the world they're going to be in. When you're worried about the collapse of civilization, it feels artificial to get fired up about whether an 18-year-old ran out of bounds or whether or not he should be in a football game." What do you make of his motivation to fear the collapse of civilization?
To me, it reflects. It partly reflects the polarization of where we are, and I think there are people on the wings of both parties who are afraid right now, as they certainly look ahead to the November presidential election. But even more than that, I would say that he's again taking his cues from what's working. And so, he now co-hosts the nationally syndicated radio slot that Rush Limbaugh previously hosted. And he is called in for any number of appearances on Fox and Fox News. And his company is the only non-Fox branded thing on the homepage for Fox News. So there's a symbiotic relationship there that's working.
Now, real quick, Tomi Lahren is a political personality on the Outkick platform. She moved to Nashville from L.A. She said in your article, quote, "Coming to Nashville, I get treated much better. We get to cover entertainment, but it's people who don't hate us." Really interesting. It's really hard to cover entertainment in Hollywood if you're a conservative host, end quote. Do you think Nashville is really positioning itself or becoming by default a much more friendly place for conservative viewpoints in media?
My best answer to that is I think we've had that to some degree already happening, but it wasn't as prominent, in your face, obvious. Again, Clay's been doing his thing for a number of years. Dave Ramsey's been doing his thing for a number of years, but especially post-COVID, when you had people fleeing states that were, in some degree of lockdown and social distancing and seeking places that aligned more with their, political philosophies. Tennessee has become one of those prime landing spots. Texas has become a prime landing spot. Florida has been a landing spot for those folks as well. And so I think there's, it's long attracted business leaders for, some ingredients that are traditionally conservative political stances, such as lower taxes, such as, a very small labor union presence. And that's contributed to just business growth in the Southeast. And then there are other, on a statewide level, certainly related political stances that are drawing those folks as well.
All right, last question for you. You've been in town for over 10 years, working for the Nashville Business Journal. You've seen growth over that time. You're reporting on the trends of business and its leaders. What are you curious, or what are you looking out for now?
Well, we've got our eye on how this expected transit referendum is going to go in November. We've got our eye on what Oracle is doing with its massive planned tech, healthcare, office, campus, which is just one of those things hanging out there that, reminds me that for all the growth we have seen and that we think we've seen, there's still several big puzzle pieces that haven't really snapped into place yet. And just thinking about the next 10 years from now, what that looks like, it's quite possible we could see even more change than what we've seen the 10 years that I've been here.
Adam Sichko is the senior business reporter for the Nashville Business Journal. Adam, thanks so much for being here. Thank you for your reporting, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
We have to take one last break. When we come back, we'll be talking all about sports with Mike Oregon from the Tennessean. You can join the conversation by tweeting us at This Is Nashville. We'll be right back. I'm Khalil Ekolona, and this is Nashville. Welcome back. We are moving along in our Citywide Reporter Roundup. Joining us now is Mike Oregon, a true veteran sports reporter at the Tennessean. Mike has been with the paper since 1975, when he started answering phones and running copy in the sports department. After graduation from MTSU, he joined the sports department and has been there ever since. Mike has covered high school sports, Vanderbilt and the Southeastern Conference, golf, tennis, auto racing, the Predators. He also writes a weekly column, The Mind State Chatter. Mike won Best of Gannett Awards for beat coverage and breaking news during his time covering Vanderbilt. Mike, thank you for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Khalil. Very good to be here.
Great to have you. We got a lot to talk about. I want to start with football.
Okay.
NFL's the most popular sport in the country. Titans are our local team. Before we talk about the team in the upcoming season a little bit, I do want to talk about where they play their games. Last year, new stadium was proposed. A lot of people, and it was proposed and approved. Even it's partially publicly funded, and a lot of Nashvillians were not happy about that. We did a couple episodes about that on this show.
Including the current mayor.
Yes, yes. The project is underway. Now, an article by Justin Mello with Music City Miracles, that's a Titan fan media group from SB Nation. He reports that the new Dome Stadium would be completed by February 2027 or sooner. What have you heard about the new stadium and its development?
I'm not sure of the exact date, the month, but I do expect the 27th season to be played there. That seems to be, with them breaking ground on time and things are going smoothly. Jim Wyatt of the Titans, who's their senior writer, he tweeted out something today showing kind of the time lapse of what's taking place there. I was at the marathon month ago. I guess it was 3 weeks a month ago. And while it was kind of a mess because of there's no parking at the marathon, which we've always had parking, at the finish line, which is at the in the north end zone, you could see there is a lot of progress being made. So I'll be surprised if it's not ready by the 27th season. Now, as far as February, I don't know, but I would say at some point, by spring of that year.
Okay, as I mentioned, the stadium is going to be domed. So what other events, sporting or otherwise, are going to take place there?
Well, I think you can do so much there, and that's the reason. That's one of the big reasons that the stadium got approved, along with the fact that it was either going to have to be rebuilt, and it's all built of steel, and the rebuild would have been as expensive as building a new one. So you'll be able to play soccer there. Of course, we have a soccer stadium now, but for maybe some of the international events that draw more than 30,000, which is capacity over the stadium, you'd have to that they have now. You'd be able to play at the new arena, at the new stadium. You play hockey, which we've already done that. You can do anything.
A Final Four, perhaps.
Absolutely, a Final Four. And that was one of the big things to the reasons to build it, a men's or women's or both, obviously. But we've had a Final Four, a women's, and this would be even a better setting for that. So there's really not much you couldn't do there. You couldn't play baseball, I don't guess, because of the configuration, but pretty much anything else.
All right. Now, we're going to get to the team a little bit. They've made a lot of changes. Gone are head coach Mike Vrabel. Gone is longtime star running back Derrick Henry. In our first-time head coach, Brian Callahan, they got what they traded for Kansas City Chiefs star defensive back Ladarius Sneed. A great wide receiver came to the team in Calvin Ridley through free agency. What do you make of all these changes?
I think they're going to try to make a run for it this year. I think they're going to try to contend, in the division. I think they can, and I believe it's based on what they saw. I think what Brian Callahan saw last year from Will Levis, the quarterback. That was the one positive that took place this past season, was that Will Levis got out there and played and took his lumps and found out what he needed to do and what he didn't need to do, like run the ball so much. And I think he's probably got a better offensive coaching staff now in place to help him along. So I think they're going to try. Now, you mentioned some of the additions, and that's going to be tough to fit in so many new positions, a new center, a new wide receiver. Ladarius Sneed, we got to see about his knees. New running back. How long's it been since this team has had a new running back?
Yeah.
Henry was there forever. Seems like going all the way back to Eddie George almost. But it's going to be a completely new scheme. With Callahan, he brought his dad, who is a noted, one of the greatest offensive line coaches in the NFL in recent history, and that was a huge problem for the past 2 years. Was just one of the worst offensive lines in the country. So any improvement there will help them be better.
So Titans fans should be optimistically positive for this coming season.
Yes, I think you could see a better season than last season. I'd be cautious, but I think that 8-9 wins are not out of the question.
8-9 wins.
Yeah.
All right. We'll see how it goes this fall.
Don't set the bar too high.
All right. Now, from pro football to the college game, I do want to talk real briefly about NCAA and NIL. For those who don't understand or don't know, NIL stands for Name, Image, and Likeness. And in 2021, the NCAA allowed students to profit off of their name, image, and likeness. A lot of people feel like this move was long overdue because the NCAA universities, coaches have made millions, if not billions of dollars off of essentially these athletes playing for free. Now they can get a little some of that cash for themselves. But the rules aren't necessarily clear. Tell me, like, what you know of the state of Tennessee and Virginia. They're engaged in an antitrust lawsuit against the NCAA. Can you just briefly explain to us what it's about?
Well, actually, what you said is very accurate and kind of encapsulates everything. The rules are not very clear. There basically aren't any rules. When the Supreme Court passed the ruling that athletes can profit from their name, image, likeness. The opinion by Neil Gorsuch, the justice, he said, going forward, not only are we in favor of this, but we will side with the athlete going forward. And I think that what you see going on with Tennessee right now, the University of Tennessee, is evident of that. Is that whenever an athlete is that the rules are tried to impose on either the athlete or the university or the outer being that's supplying the what they're called as collectives for the NIL for the money, they're going to side with the athlete. And I think the NCAA is finally coming to the realization they're not all powerful like it has been, the body has been forever. Yeah. And listen, when we're talking about the NCAA, we're not talking about a group of individuals in a big building. These are university presidents. These are athletic directors that serve on committees. So you got to look where the thumb's pointing when you point at the NCAA, because it's pointing right back at you. And you failed to do anything for a long time, as you mentioned, and something that needed to be done. And you could have reeled this in a long time ago if you'd have done the right thing. You didn't do the right thing. So now going forward, you're going to have situations like with Tennessee and other teams universities that come up like that, where they're going to look at the Supreme Court ruling and they're just going to say, we don't have a case here.
Now, another thing about NIL, what it's done is kind of affected student athletes with transferring, the transfer portal. No longer do student athletes have to sit out a year. They can transfer immediately to another school and play immediately. How do you think that's going to affect local universities?
Oh, that's going to be for the non-Power 5, the very top. It's devastating. It's like beating your head up against a wall. You recruit a player and you develop him, and or her, and they develop into a very good player. Well, they're not going to stay. And this goes back to the NIL because you can't afford to keep them. And a Power 5 school, an SEC school, Big Ten, a ACC, as long as it exists, is going to be able to pay them more to come and be on their team. We've seen it with Belmont the last couple of years. They've lost 5 of their best players as if they do what they're supposed to do and get better and become very good players, then they're going to move on. We've seen it with Tennessee Tech. Tennessee State right now needs to replace 12 basketball players.
Wow, that's practically the entire team.
Yes, you're going to see turnover. On the one hand, it's okay because if you're not good, you can recover. You can just wipe out your whole team and start all over again instead of building through recruiting in the past. But the bigger picture is if you are good, or if you have a couple of elements that are good, then you're going to lose them. That's all there is to it.
I only have a couple minutes left. I got to ask you a couple quick questions. There's talk of getting a new pro sports team, baseball or WNBA. What do you think is going to happen first?
I think that the WNBA has a strong chance of coming first. I do personally. I believe we're going to get a Major League Baseball team here. I think we're going to get an expansion team whenever the MLB decides to expand. Now that's the big question, and the commissioner Manfred made it clear at recently at the Associated Press Sports Editors meeting that that's probably not going to be for about the next 5 years. So we're not going to see a new baseball team come here maybe for about 4 or 5, 6 years. But that's okay because we don't have anywhere for them to play. I heard when you were talking with Adam on the previous segment. Now, on the other hand, they better quickly find somewhere for them to play, or there's going to be nowhere to put them because everything's going to be already built up and established. But I think baseball will come. I think there's momentum. I think Nashville's hot enough to get a baseball team. game. But before that, I think we'll get a WNBA team. And right now is a great time because the WNBA is on the uptick with what's going on there. And this is a hotbed for women's basketball. Always has been. Middle Tennessee always has been. And I think it would do well. And they could play either at Brigstone or Municipal Auditorium. Municipal Auditorium has been spruced up by the Nashville Cats of the Arena Football League. It's a nice venue now, and it's size at 10,000 capacity is good for the WNBA for what it is right now. So that's one of the big things always is having a venue to play in, and the WNBA would have something immediately.
All right, lastly, real briefly about women's college basketball. TSU has just hired 7-time WNBA All-Star Candace Dupree to be the head coach of their women's program. What do you think about that move?
I like that move, and it didn't surprise me. Mickey Allen is a sharp guy. He's the athletics director at Tennessee State, and I knew he was going to do something like that. I knew he was going to try to capitalize, as we just mentioned, the WNBA being on the uptick, being in the spotlight, being hotter than it's ever been, and so it didn't surprise me. I didn't know who he was going to go after, but it didn't surprise me that he went after a legendary player in the WNBA, and I think she'll be successful. I think she'll have a lot of success at Tennessee State.
Mike Organ is the college sports reporter and a true veteran sports reporter at the Tennessean. Mike, I had so much fun. Thanks again.
Me too. Thanks, Cliff, for having me.
And thanks to you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville is a production of Nashville Public Radio. Today's episode was produced by Katherine Ceicys and Mary Mancini. It was directed by Tasha A.F. Lemley. Our technical director and board operator is Liv Lombardi. The masterminds behind our theme music are Laurent and Demir Blade. You can listen back at This Is Nashville or wherever you get good podcasts. And the conversation doesn't end here. Tweet us at This Is Nashville. Find us on Instagram and tell us what you want from our show by filling out our quick survey online. This is Nashville. I'm Khalil Ekalona. We'll see you tomorrow, everybody, and be good to each other.